Coming to you live from the friendly confines of Wrigley Field. This is episode 19 of TSTNT. This is going to be a good episode. You're going to love the pregame monologue because Wrigley Field, well, it's Wrigley Field. It's one of the most iconic venues in all of sports. Not just baseball, all of sports. So, longer pregame monologue through VO on this one. So, sit back, relax, enjoy.
Welcome to the Windy City. This is our first of what will be many vlogs to take place in Chicago. I could not be more excited to show you around our most iconic venue yet. Now let's get into the monologue. The Chicago Cubs franchise originally began as the Chicago White Stockings. Hold it. Does that sound familiar? What is it with the quote-unquote other franchise in the city taking the name of the team in the same city? You heard in the last episode that the Braves were originally the Boston Red Stockings before the team of that nearly same name came around. Same situation in Chicago. The White Stockings were the White Sox before the White Sox. The South Side Club was a founding member of the American League when it became a major league in 1901, but those guys are for another episode. The North Side Club, on the other hand, began in 1871. They joined the National League when it was first formed in 1876. They had the White Stockings name until 1890. That year, the team was very young, and they went by the name Colts. A colt, of course, is a young horse. But then in 1898, things got a bit wacky when they changed their name to Orphans. Yes, the Chicago Orphans. That new name can be explained because of a change in team leadership. The team would part ways with their longtime manager, Cap Anson, and they were left without a clear leader, so the media just kept calling them the Orphans, and the name somehow stuck. As you can imagine, that name wouldn't last very long, and in 1903, to once again reflect their youthful roster, they switched to Cubs, and it has stuck ever since. The Chicago Daily News actually came up with that name for that reason. The name, of course, specifically refers to bear cubs, and it's not necessarily known on why they chose the bear, when other animal species like lions and tigers also refer to their youngsters as cubs as well. Maybe the football team played a role? We'll mention them again in a bit. Anyway, we're here to check out the Cubs ballpark, one of the most iconic venues, not just in baseball, but in all of sports. The friendly confines of Wrigley Field. This place was originally built in 1914 in just 2 months. And it wasn't even for the Cubs, believe it or not. Rather, it was built for another baseball team called the Chicago Whales, a team that played in the Federal League, and the original name of the place was Weigman Park, named after Whales owner Charles Weigman. The Federal League hoped to reach Major League status like the National and American Leagues, but it wasn't meant to be, as the league would fold in 1915. The Cubs would swoop into Weigman Park in 1916 after Weigman himself, with the support of chewing gum entrepreneur William Wrigley, who started the Wrigley Company, bought the Cubs and moved them over to the new ballpark. William Wrigley became an investor and would then acquire controlling interests of a team in 1921, and then the place would be named in his honor in 1926, and the Wrigley Field name has stuck ever since. For a long time, Wrigley Field has hosted both baseball and football. It hosted the Chicago Cardinals, now the Arizona Cardinals, from 1931 to 1938, and the Chicago Bears for far longer, from 1921 to 1970. Given all of that activity as a dual-purpose venue, it truly is amazing that Wrigley Field is still standing today and in better shape than it's ever been. This leads us to the meat and bones of this monologue. Did you know that this place almost had a date with the Wrecking Ball? And it wasn't even that long ago. Sit down and grab your popcorn because this monologue is about to get real interesting. In the 2000s, Wrigley Field was in trouble, and it seemed like the end of this long-standing ballpark was near. In 2003, there were power outage issues that caused games to be suspended. A year later, in 2004, concrete began to fall, which raised obvious safety questions. A year after that, in 2005, the place hosted a Jimmy Buffett concert. During the song Fins, the crowd sways side to side. Cubs leadership noticed that the upper deck really seemed to shift with the crowd, which was another major safety hazard. Previous Cubs ownership groups had tried to make renovations to Wrigley, but none of them ever came to fruition. Before we go further, let's back up. Wrigley Field is the epitome of a neighborhood ballpark. Situated in the heart of Northside Chicago's Lakeview neighborhood, Wrigley Field is home to over 60,000 people in the neighborhood, and life without it would be simply unfathomable. Again, it's been part of the neighborhood since it was built in 1914. As also mentioned earlier, it's known as the Friendly Confines. That nickname was given by Mr. Cub himself, Ernie Banks, who we'll talk about later on. He loved the place's intimacy and welcoming atmosphere, but the team and the neighborhood haven't always been on friendly terms. In the 1980s, the two sides got into a very heated argument about the use of lights. The Cubs for over 70 years had only played games during the day so as not to disrupt the peaceful neighborhood. But now, they wanted to play night games. The neighborhood had successfully prevented the Cubs from installing lights, but the team managed to get their lights anyway in 1988. The team was missing out on revenue generated by night games like ticket sales and TV broadcast deals, and Major League Baseball also said that playoff games couldn't be played there unless they installed lights. The light fight was only the beginning. It would set the stage for more conflicts to come between the neighborhood and the team. Anytime the Cubs tried to make any major changes to Wrigley Field, there would be serious pushback. The Tribune Company owned the team for a long time, but then the team was sold to the Ricketts family in 2009 for $845 million. The family preferred to keep Wrigley alive, but all options were on the table. Chairman Tom Ricketts would then go to Springfield and ask the Illinois government for $300 million in bonds to renovate Wrigley. The state essentially told him, "Get lost." Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel didn't treat him any differently. He made it clear the city wouldn't be giving a dime to the Cubs. So how are the Cubs supposed to get their money to fix up Wrigley? Before we answer that question, we need to talk about the rooftops. Nearby apartment buildings had rooftop views for watching the games. It became a business, and owners would charge fans to watch from up top, and it was incredibly profitable. The Cubs were cool with it at first and agreed not to block views of the games in exchange for a percentage of their revenue. However, things would take a turn in 2002 when the Cubs sued the rooftop owners for copyright infringement. The Cubs said they were stealing the team's product. The Cubs also wanted to make more money by putting up more advertising signage, which would inevitably block those rooftop views, and the rooftop owners were not happy. With all of this tension, Wrigley renovation plans were in jeopardy. Renovating an older ballpark sometimes costs even more than building a completely new ballpark. Even if renovations do happen, it still doesn't have the modern amenities that make teams their money. So the Cubs stayed focused on renovating Wrigley, but they knew they had to get this right. Finding that balance between historic charm and modernity was the key. Well, not if the rooftop owners had anything to say about it. They would sue the city to stop the Cubs from putting up signs, and they claimed that the signs would violate the landmark ordinance protecting Wrigley's features. The project, known as the 1060 Project as the address of Wrigley Field is 1060 West Addison, would stall and then die if the team kept waiting for a resolution. So now the question is, do they stop the project or do they move forward? They went with the latter, determined to save this beloved ballpark. The 1060 team toured other famed sports venues such as Fenway Park, the Rose Bowl, Lambeau Field, Madison Square Garden, among others, to see how they've kept their iconic status while blending in modernity to keep with the times. With the building's 100th anniversary approaching in 2014, the clock was ticking, and the Cubs needed to get to work to save this place. Tom Ricketts believed his team had, in his words, the worst facilities in baseball. There were aforementioned concrete problems, problems with the steel, concession issues, cramped restrooms, among a litany of other challenges that Wrigley had. Since 1914, this building has gone through expansion after expansion and renovation after renovation, and the 1060 project would be the latest venture to keep up an ever-evolving venue. Some iconic things about Wrigley Field that the team wouldn't dare mess with included the marquee, the ivy, and the hand-operated scoreboard out in center field. Everything else was open to updating. In 2014, 5 years after the Ricketts family bought the team and promised to save Wrigley, Project 1060 was a go. Funded primarily by the family and revenue that came from increased advertisements and corporate sponsorships, work began immediately after the 2014 season. The project's final cost, $750 million, after initially costing $575 million. As construction progressed, workers saw just how bad the building's structural integrity was. Much of the steel was only supposed to be replated, but it instead needed to be replaced. So phase 1 was focused on fixing up the bones of the place, and future phases would build upon that. Up next, the focus was on the outfield, and this would usher in Wrigley's most controversial new addition, new video boards. This, of course, was the big conflict that the rooftop owners had, and was the biggest part of the lawsuit. They believed they could stop anything that blocked their view. But the team contended that wasn't what the contract said. The contract said the team could put up signs or video boards or make other changes so long as it was approved by the city. A local judge agreed with the Cubs, and up went the boards. Yes, every other Major League ballpark has big, fancy video boards, but there were fans that still objected to it, saying it would take away some of the beautiful scenery of Wrigley. As mentioned, the Cubs refused to touch the hand-operated board in center field, but they still wanted to put up the new boards in left and right fields to give fans new info they were missing in the past, like player info or stats, or even walk-up songs. It also increased revenue for the team, and that money was reinvested into the team. They hired more scouts, invested in player development technology, and of course increased player salaries so they could sign and keep great players. One thing that was holding the Cubs back from winning that ever so elusive World Series wasn't even on the field. It was the team clubhouse, and the Ricketts family made a mandate to give it a major facelift. Laura Ricketts called it, in her words, worse than my high school locker room. Safe to say, it was in very bad shape and had nearly nothing that Major League players needed to get ready for games. So while the Cubs were playing their 2015 season, there was construction going on just outside the building. Construction crews dug deep and built the new clubhouse underground between the ballpark and Clark Street. It wasn't an easy project, but they got it done, and at 30,000 square feet, it was the second largest clubhouse in Major League Baseball next to the Yankees. The 2016 season was the Cubs' first full season with the clubhouse, and what happened that season? You already know. The Cubs won the World Series for the first time in 108 years. Cubs president Theo Epstein said part of that credit belongs to the clubhouse. It allowed star player Kyle Schwarber to rehab from an injury quicker thanks to the athletic training equipment they had. He played a key role in winning the Cubs the World Series that year. The last phases of 1060 focused on improving the fan experience. The concessions weren't great, concourses were skinny and cramped, premium spaces didn't really feel that way, and even the restrooms were small in number. The team again believed they could deliver on finding that healthy balance between history and modernity. Expanding the space was absolutely necessary for the main concourse, concession stands, number of restrooms, and they also needed more and better premium spaces. So 6 new patios were added to create an upper concourse, which gave the main concourse more breathing room and also had pleasant views of the Chicago skyline. Then construction proceeded underneath the building to build 3 underground clubs. All in all, the Cubs wanted to make sure people like your grandparents still recognized this beloved ballpark whenever they came to a game, keeping and restoring that same historic charm to make it feel like you're traveling back in time, and at the same time, making necessary modern additions and improvements to stay with the times and keep the building healthy. Project 1060 would reach completion in 2019, and in 2020, Wrigley Field was named a U.S. National Historic Landmark. Through the whole project, the prestigious, iconic, and beloved status of this ballpark hasn't changed a bit.
Weird circumstances so far to start because I just got here. It's now the 6th inning. I just flew in to Chicago from Omaha. And so, yeah, I'll try to do what I can, make the most of what we got now. But right now, the Cubs are playing the Milwaukee Brewers. Brewers, unfortunately, currently lead 8-3. But yeah, again, we're going to make the most of this, and we will be back here on Saturday as the Cubs face the Seattle Mariners. We'll get a more full picture of Wrigley then. So yeah.
Here's a view from the upper deck of Wrigley Field.
Such a beautiful view. Such a beautiful ballpark. So happy to be here.
Let's head up the ramp and check out the upper concourse. I'm not sure I'd call this a concourse, but it's the closest thing to it. Let's explore it though. Over on the right, over the fence, you'll see views of Gallagher Way, which we'll explore later on, part of the Wrigleyville neighborhood, which we'll also explore later on, and even a decent view of the Chicago skyline. This here is the middle area of the ballpark. Again, not sure I'd call this a concourse, but it sort of is. Anyway, this area has views that tend to be obstructed, especially by the support pillars. Well, that's what you get in an older ballpark, and that's what also makes those scoreboards on the left necessary. On the right, you'll see people with standing room only tickets. That's what I had this first game. bottom of the 7th inning. As mentioned, the Cubs were trailing by 5, but then Ian Happ went yard to put 2 more runs on the board for the Cubs, making the score 8-5. In the 8th inning, the Cubs would inch even closer when Carson Kelly would hit a grounder with the bases loaded that forced an out at second, but it scored Pete Crow Armstrong, and that put runners on the corners. Then the very next batter, Nico Horner, would single on a ground ball to short, scoring Dansby Swanson, and it was now an 8-7 game. Unfortunately for the Cubs, though, a pop-out would end the inning. So it all came down to the bottom of the ninth. To start, Ian Happ would walk. But then a strikeout and a double play would end it, and Milwaukee took the win.
That was a weird but sort of a fun half game we witnessed there. Final score for game 1, Milwaukee takes it over Chicago 8-7. So that sucks a bit, but we're not done yet. We'll be back here Saturday as the Cubs face the Seattle Mariners. We'll get the full Wrigley Field experience on Saturday. So stay tuned.
Taking a little break from the game action, no trip to Chicago is ever complete without deep dish pizza. My favorite kind of pizza. And there may not be a better deep dish pizza institution in Chicago than Lou Malnati's. Let's eat.
All right, I got me here Lou Malnati's Pizza. This is classic Chicago deep dish pizza. It's the best kind of pizza around. Let's dig into it. Great sauce. Good cheese too. Let's try the crust. So good. Maybe the greatest ever. First ever, 11 out of 10.
Back at it for day 2 of this episode. Walking through downtown Chicago, we're about to take the L over to Addison, which of course is the Wrigley Field station. So yeah, should be a good game. Should be a very good time at Wrigley. Sit back, relax, continue to enjoy this episode. All right, we are on the red line, headed to Wrigley. And this is basically the only public transportation option to get to Wrigley Field. Because I mean, I don't think there's a bus line. I'm not totally sure about that. But parking is almost non-existent at Wrigley. It's a neighborhood ballpark, so parking there is like very, very scarce. So yeah, taking the red line is essentially your only option. But subways are fun, aren't they?
Before we walk inside for Game 2, we gotta take some time to explore this Wrigleyville neighborhood. You're gonna see this whole place is like a party scene before every game. Let's walk around. Let's take a few minutes to recognize the statues around here. We begin with none other than one of the most beloved broadcasters in baseball history, Harry Carey. He spent over 50 years in baseball broadcasting, covering the Cardinals, the A's, the White Sox, and ultimately the Cubs. Back in the day, you could always listen to him call the Cubs games on WGN. He was very well known for his colorful style, catchphrases like, "Holy cow!" And of course, the way he would sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" every 7th inning and begin it with, "Let me hear ya. A 1. 2, 3. You'll hear more of Harry Carey later on. You can find his statue towards the back end where the bleachers are.
These prohibited items, along with several others, are listed on signs around the ballpark, on Cubs.com, and in the MLB ballpark app. Thank you for visiting Wrigley.
Let's head inside to what we talked about earlier. This is Gallagher Way. This is a ticketed green space just outside the ballpark. They've got a stage here for pregame concerts, fountains. Those were especially needed because it was a hot day. Fun lawn games, a foosball table, beer and food. It's a very fun area to hang out before the game. Let's move on to the player statues that are here. We begin with Ferguson Jenkins. Fergie was one of the all-time great pitchers. He was the first ever Canadian to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Here's another guy we talked about earlier, Ernie Banks. Mr. Cub was one of the game's greatest power hitters. He was also so passionate about the game, he wanted to play as many games as he could. He especially loved doubleheaders and is well known for the phrase, "Let's play two." Here is sweet swinging Billy Williams. This guy had over 2,700 hits in his career, was the 1972 batting champion, and had a streak of playing over 1,100 consecutive games that stood as a National League record for many years. On to Ron Santo, he was one of the Cubs' best hitters, but he may have been an even better fielder. He won the Golden Glove 5 times. And we end with Ryne Sandberg. Rhino was a hell of a player at the plate and on the field. He earned 7 Silver Slugger awards and would earn 9 Golden Gloves. One more thing before we head in. We gotta talk about the marquee. It's things like this that would give Wrigley Field its charm. This was first installed in 1934 and was originally green. It was then repainted blue in 1939, probably to reflect both the Cubs and the Bears. Also, the Bears didn't like the color green, since that's a Packers color. Then in 1960, the marquee was repainted once again, giving it its iconic red. The sign was installed originally to promote game day ticket sales, as Cubs relied heavily on selling tickets on the days of games. And the marquee was incredibly effective at that. Alright, that's enough fooling around. Let's make our way inside, and here's our first look from the seat. Adjacent to the main concourse is this walkway, which had free sunscreen and hand sanitizer. Boy, did I need that sunscreen. It's also nearby the Cubs Hall of Fame. Let's go check it out. Let's move on to the main concourse, Wrigley Field's only proper concourse. Let's check out the team score.
Cubs have homered in every inning.
In the end, we're once again adding to my nephew's Beanie Baby collection with Clark. Now, this is definitely not what Clark actually looks like, but this is the best I could find. Slightly disappointing, but this bear claw I got him was cool. I found this as I was in the checkout line. Good snag. As for what Clark actually looks like, here I am with him. He of course got his name as Wrigley Field is on the intersection of Addison and Clark Streets. He was taking pictures with fans during the first game. And here's Clark again in game 2, cooling fans down with a squirt gun. He truly is a bear of the people. Oh, and we also have to check out this jersey. I didn't buy this. Actually, my mom got this for me. She's a big Cubs fan. This alternate powder blue jersey is meant to be a tribute to the blues music scene here in Chicago. Personally, I wish it were more city detailed, like a typical City Connect jersey, but it ain't bad. It looks very much like the Chicago flag actually. Powder blue with some red on it, and notice the star on the red C. There's also a Chicago patch on the sleeve. No clue how they managed to fit 7 letters in that, but that's good work. Before we get into gameplay, there's a couple more things we got to talk about that give Wrigley Field its charm. One of them is the hand-operated scoreboard. This was set up in 1937, and it's been largely untouched since it first went up. It's a crap ton of work for the scoreboard workers to follow all of those games, as well as the very game happening in front of them. And then, of course, there's the ivy. Once again, back in 1937, P.K. Wrigley, who was William Wrigley's son, that inherited the team after his father's passing in 1932, and team treasurer Bill Veek were talking about potential renovations for the ballpark, and they wanted something that was visually pleasing to look at, and so they came up with ivy on the walls. Veek was inspired to plant ivy on the walls after a trip to a minor league ballpark in Indianapolis that had that. Typically, Major League Baseball requires all of its outfield walls to be padded, but the Wrigley Field ivy was grandfathered into that rule, and it's the only Major League ballpark that doesn't have padded walls. There's a brick wall behind the ivy, and it helps protect outfielders from the bricks. And then just above the ivy, there's the basket that is used to keep fans from interfering with balls in play. The ground rules state that any ball that lands there is a home run. There's also ground rules that state that if a ball is lost into the ivy, the outfielder is supposed to throw up his hands, and the play is ruled the ground rule double. Well, at least that's what you're supposed to do. If you manage to reach into the ivy for the ball, then it's still live, and base runners can still advance. Okay, one more thing I'd like to add. If you're looking for the 2016 World Series trophy, you would think they would have it in their Hall of Fame area. That's what I thought too. Well, think again. Near the main entrance, right under where the marquee is, there's this special room that fans line up to get into, and they get their picture with the 2016 trophy. And well, here I am with it. It's good that the trophy is accessible. I just kind of wish it was in the Hall of Fame area with all the other major Cubs awards. All right, once again, that's enough fooling around. Let's get back to the seat and begin game 2.
Making his way to the mound, who's a professional MMA middleweight fighter. with a record of 10 wins and 1 loss. Next weekend, they'll be fighting at the PFL World Tournament semifinals at the Wintrust Arena.
Now, unfortunately, although you can hear that there is an organist here at Wrigley, you can't really hear him. So that sucks. And so unfortunately for this episode, there won't be much, if not any, organ music footage. So that blows. Should also mention that the organist here is Josh Langhoff. It appears he's the backup organist here because John Benedek, who we featured in episode 2, well, he's in Omaha for the College World Series, like the episode. So, yeah, John, he's normally the organist here, but yeah, Josh Langhoff he's doing a good job, playing some good tunes. Can barely hear him, so I don't think you guys could hear him through the video very well, and so that's why, yeah, that explains the lack of organist content for this episode. But yeah, he's doing what he can. He's doing a good job.
Starting off with a bang!
2 or 4?
Go Bear! the basket. 4 dingers.
Man, all these home runs can make me hungry. Let's go back into the concourse and get some food. We've got ourselves here a Wrigley Field Smoky. I always love me a good hot dog, but I don't think I had ever had one with grilled onions. Let's try this out.
All right, this here is the Wrigley Field Smoky. It's basically a hot dog with some onions on it. Let's see if that enhances the flavor. Here we go. Sorry about that. It does. Those onions are very good. I don't normally like onions on burgers, but onions on hot dogs are great. I'll say 9.5 out of 10.
Another one right into the basket. Why the W?
Great game and a great win for the Cubs. Final score, the Cubs take it 10-7 over Seattle. That's going to wrap things up for this episode. If you like what you saw, be sure to give this video a like. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you love sports venue content as much as I do. Thank you so much for watching episode 19 of TSTNT. Signing off from the friendly confines of Wrigley Field and Wrigleyville, as you can see. We'll see you in the next video.